Clear prop.
Star 73 Yankee number 2 following twin traffic, 3 mile final, clear Pleasantville. 1 Charlie Bravo, exit in runway 25, going 4 mile final.
This is Behind the Prop with United Flight Systems owner and licensed pilot Bobby Doss and his co-host, Major Airline Captain and designated pilot examiner Wally Mulhern. Now let's go Behind the Prop.
What's up, Wally?
Hey, Bobby, how are you?
Fantastic. This week we take on the FAR aim a little bit and bring some regulations to the world, but not in the sense of we're going to teach the regulations. We want to talk about making better pilots. So this week's all about pre-flight action, 91-103. I'm sure CFIs and students out there have all been through the reg, and the common, I guess, acronym that people use is PAVE. The FAA has some good documents on it, but I think today we want to talk about why we all think through PAVE and probably use it before we get in a plane. What are some of the common pitfalls that we don't do well, or maybe you don't see people doing perfectly on check rides or in your training with other applicants, not applicants, but the people that you might be teaching how to fly as a CFI? What should we maybe focus on a little bit more that we don't focus on good enough? Maybe it's some of these things that our CFI said, on your check ride, do this, but we really should be doing it all the time.
Right.
So let's just jump right into PAVE and start talking about some of those things. And if you have thoughts or comments out there in the podcast world, give us an email or a comment on Facebook, and we will incorporate your conversation. So with that, PAVE, let's talk about the pilot. What are some of the things that we probably regularly do and or think about, but maybe we don't do a good enough job of preparing for as it is with the flight? And I jokingly asked you before we talked, how many people do you think really know the length of a runway at a remote airport that they've never been to before? But it's in a big city,
right,
with a tower.
Right.
Do you think we all just maybe assume it's big enough, wide enough?
Yeah.
And we don't really know?
Yeah, if you know the airlines go in there, well, it's big enough for me, it's good enough for me. So technically that doesn't meet the requirements, as you need to check runway lengths and you need to be aware of that. But I think as far as the when I think of pre-flight, or I think when most people think of pre-flight, they think of going around and walking around an airplane and making sure the airplane is ready to go. But, there's 3 other words in the word PAVE. And the first one is pilot. So, the first thing that we need to think about when we're getting ready to go fly is the pilot. Am I ready to go? Do I have everything that I need to go? I see a lot of people that keep their me personally, and again, we're going to talk about techniques, maybe how everybody does it, but I personally keep my pilot documents, my medical, my pilot certificates, and my radio license. I keep that in my wallet, okay? Now, have I ever gone and flown an airplane without my wallet? I don't think so. I guess it's possible. But, my wallet is usually in my back pocket. A lot of pilots keep their documents in a flight bag, and that's fine, as long as your flight bag is always with you when you fly. One thing I see with private pilot applicants, when I ask to see their documents, one document that I check is their medical. And a lot of times their medical is taped into their logbook. And at the end of the check ride, I'll have a discussion with the applicant. Hopefully the check ride has been satisfactory. So this person is now a private pilot. I will comment to them, because during the ground portion of the check ride, I will ask them if their logbook is required to be with them when they exercise the privileges of a private pilot. And the correct answer is no, your logbook does not need to be with you. But if you're going to choose to, affix your medical to your logbook, well, you got to have the medical. And if it's stuck in your logbook, well, then you got to have your logbook. And a lot of pilots will say, well, I'm never going to fly without my logbook. And I said, well, that's fine, but I think the logbook is something, at least for me, I like to keep my logbook at home. Of course, my logbooks are electronic now, so they're on my iPad, and it's in the cloud. It's on I can access it any way I want to now. So it's a little bit of a different world, but we're assuming back in the days of a paper logbook, which most people still use, at least for their private pilot training. But suppose you now have your private pilot certificate, and you're out and you drive by the airport and you stop by the flight school, and they say, "Hey, we got this airplane. We need to ferry from here to the airport 40 miles away. You think you could do that?" And you say, yeah, of course I can do that. Well, your logbook's at home, your medical's at home, so legally you can't do it. So might be a consideration. And again, I'm not saying it's the right thing to do. It's how I do it. It works for me. But just be aware of that. I mean, you as the pilot, you need to have the required documents with you. And, of course, you need to be healthy, in the right state of mind, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, I'm a flight bag guy. I keep my medical and my certificates in my flight bag. Obviously, my driver's license is in my wallet. And I just have a pattern that I've created, or a technique I've created over time, where as soon as I pull my headset out of my headset bag, I put my wallet and keys in that, because I want those to come right out whenever I get to my destination as well. That way, it's kind of a check for me that I've got my wallet, driver's license, and then I've got my other stuff in my flight bag. But we've all been there and seen it, probably, where that flight bag was cleaned out or something was moved, and you might lose that. So if you're that if you use that technique, we need to think about how often we check those documents, make sure they're with us as well. Of course, I think we all go through the I'm safe stuff, at least on a somewhat regular basis. I guarantee you, everybody that meets you in Check Ride, they've got it written out, probably ready to go. They talk through all of it. One thing that came up recently, someone that was on their day off told me they couldn't fly. It was a student, meaning a commercial student or whatever, because they had just taken Claritin or something, right? Well, shockingly enough, Claritin, some of these allergy medicines are on the 24-hour list or 48-hour list.
Yes.
That we probably aren't all cognizantly aware of if we're just going to take a few laps in the pattern. But that could be a big deal if you're wanting to be a professional pilot and make a mistake like that. So
yeah,
it's not just have I drank or have I done something that alters my state of mind. It could be something that's on the list that could be a bad thing that could come back to haunt you. So be cognizant of those things. If you have a trip, don't take something that might make your nose stop running, if you know what I mean.
Right.
Physical condition, more so, again, sleep, those sorts of things. I think that's a pretty good thing that we go through. I think it's the knowledge around the flight that we get a little lazy's the word that comes to mind. I'm not sure that word's the right one, but the preparation around that stuff. It's, I guess, a combination of the environment and the airports that I'm thinking about, right? It's not so much the destination, because we 99% of the time get to that destination. It's what about some of the alternate stuff? And we're in Houston. I fly to Austin a lot. I think of Brenham and Giddings is kind of my two intermediate spots, and I know I can land a Cessna there, but what if I'm in the Twin? Can I land at both those places? I know I can at Brenham, but I'm not really sure. I've checked Giddings in a long time. And it's not that I might not be able to land there, but can I take off from there, right? I don't know I'd have to go through and do some work to make sure I knew my stopping distance and that airport's runway length.
Yeah.
What if both those airports have single runways? What if I'm in Austin? Austin's got two runways. One's big, one's small. The small one's not always open, but what if the big one was closed and the small one was open? Could I get out of there in the Twin? I'm going to bet I probably couldn't. It's some of those things that I think we probably take for granted in this light aircraft world that I don't think you have the luxury of doing in your major aircraft world. I'm sure dispatch is helping you find these things, but there's some real places we could get pinned in, I would think, in some of that planning for the airport environment and the things that I need to be thinking about for my flight.
Yeah, and as I look at FAR 91103, there are two letters. There's A and B, and I think what we got to be careful of is if I'm looking at A and I'm quoting from the regulation right here. It says, for a flight under IFR, I think a lot of people quit reading right there. Say, okay, I'm taking a VFR flight to New Orleans today. Okay, well, A doesn't apply to me because it starts with for a flight under IFR. But if you keep reading, there's no comma, so just keep reading. It says for a flight under IFR or a flight and not in the vicinity of an airport. Oh, geez. Well, that's me. I'm going to New
Can you
Orleans.
define vicinity for me? Is that a 50-foot circle? Is that a 5-mile circle?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what the answer is to that, but I would say I would go with about a 5-mile circle. But
anything
anyway,
outside the pattern would probably be what I think of.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's going to be susceptible to whatever the situation happens
right.
when it happens. So I would just say anywhere you're outside that pattern,
Yeah.
you probably ought to take heed to this
Yeah.
one.
So basically it says for flight under IFR, flight not in the vicinity of an airport, weather reports and forecasts, fuel requirements, alternatives available if the planned flight cannot be completed, and any known traffic delays of which the pilot in command has been advised by ATC. So that's an open book. It says alternatives available. So as I think of a flight from here to New Orleans, I'm thinking, well, I got Beaumont, I've got Lake Charles, I got Lafayette, I got Baton Rouge, and I've got New Orleans. Okay, those are my alternatives, and I'm not looking at a map. those are the cities.
You've made the drive
right?
too.
Yeah, exactly. Well, what if the Beaumont Airport is closed? What if Lake Charles is closed? Those are things that I need to be aware of.
But those are both close to water, maybe not right on the water too, but you could think that maybe more inland we would have less moisture in the air,
right?
Giving me a better opportunity if something really bad happened.
Yeah.
So how far in that planning do I go north?
Yeah.
I bet if I run out of fuel and don't get to an alternate, the FAA is going to have a problem if I don't know about a whole bunch of them, right? I mean, we could always be worst case scenario, but I bet we should probably plan for something that's not in these major cities right on the coast.
Right.
Beyond
exactly.
that, for sure. I think what's funny is that bullet, A, 91103A, pretty much means you have to know everything possibly that could happen and your plan of action to solve for anything that could possibly happen.
Yeah, exactly. Are the runway lights inoperative? Can you even read the NOTAM that talks about runway lights being inoperative? We just talked about a local airport here that has the runway lights out, and the 4-letter code for the runway lights, it's REDL, runway edge lights. I think on the surface, if most people would look at that and go, "Gee, well, I don't need a REDL." What's a REDL? I don't know.
Well, and even bigger on that airport in that NOTAM is it's old. It's in its 65th day.
Right.
So if you think about really what the world's doing now, if they look in ForeFlight, and there's 4 NOTAMs for that airport, and the newest one is obstruction 2 miles southeast of the field for whatever reason without a light on it. And then I look down, I read 2 more, and I get to this older one that's 63 days old, and it says REDL out, REDL inop. I'm probably not going to pay much attention to it.
Right.
Well, that's probably a really big problem if you're planning on landing at 10 o'clock at night.
Yeah, exactly.
And this airport happens to be in a really remote part of Houston that does not have a lot of area lights around you that would help light that place up at all.
Yeah, and if you're using it as an alternate, I mean, we are talking about a perfect storm here where multiple things go wrong. But if you are planning to land there because of low oil pressure, and you're trying to find the airport, and you go to, or let's say you're landing there for an electrical problem. You've lost your electrical system. Well, guess what? You don't have a landing light.
Yep. Well, you say we talk about this one because it's an easy example to say, wow, what if? But how many of us really are reading all the NOTAMs? I mean, even from here to Austin, if I read every NOTAM, I probably would never get to Austin because there's hundreds of NOTAMs across every airport, across every, the little pack circle in ForeFlight, 20 miles either side of your center line, I think is what it is.
Right.
That's a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
Lots of obstructions, lights out, everything else.
Yeah.
But I would even say, does that make us numb to some of the real critical things? Like,
Yeah.
I might go to this airport at 10 p.m.
Yeah.
I might need to look up what Redl is.
Right.
We talked about it. The NOTAMs aren't the greatest thing in the world because we think they were designed for the teletype days, and we're way past that. But,
Right.
man, we're not there yet, so they don't spell it out. But it will be nice once we get to a point where that just says runway edge lights.
And this is a great segue to a future episode. You teed this up for me, Bobby. I'm gonna take this opportunity to tell our listeners about a future guest, Robert Zumwalt, who is the chairman of the National Transportation Safety Board, has agreed to be a guest on our show. He's retiring in 5 days, so we're gonna get him as a guest probably sometime in July and. Maybe late July, he'll be a guest on our episode. So the current NTSB chairman will be on Behind the Prop. So stay tuned.
That's going to be a great conversation, and I have a feeling while he's done a lot of great work, he's going to have a lot of things that he wish he could have got done and things that he wants to hear from aviators as well. So if you have a question you want us to ask Mr. NTSB, let us know, and we will get the question on the list to ask him for sure.
And I bring that up because I know that's one of the things that was on his to-do list when he took over as the chairman, was to clean up the way NOTAMs are sent out to pilots, because they're hard to understand, and I don't, and why they can't just be in plain language, I don't know. But anyway, maybe he can talk to us about that.
So we got digressed off the aircraft a little bit, but so we did pilot. Let's talk aircraft. I think we all, in training for sure, we all make some assumptions around runway length, and those are probably good. We probably need 1,000 feet to take off. We probably need 1,500 feet to land. In reality, less than that, but those are probably our safer, comfortable numbers. And let's be honest, there's not too many paved runways around the United States that are shorter than either one of those numbers.
Right.
So we probably get lulled into a sense of security that they're going to be long enough and wide enough for our needs. But crosswinds and other things come into play there that make me, as a flight school owner, think, man, I hope we're not just making that assumption every time we go,
right.
And that we really are not just on check ride day checking all those airport runway links, et cetera, but we're checking it more for our safety and our being a great pilot than we are just for that one day. The fuel becomes a big one, and I know we've talked about this a couple times, but we really don't manage fuel in a training environment too terribly often either. We have that one big practical test day that we probably do a cross-country plan and plan fuel and move weight in or out, etc. But once you get that private certificate, you're probably taking passengers, you're probably going farther, you probably need to manage fuel in a different way, both daytime and nighttime, and you may know the regs, you may have your own personal minimums, but I think it's really important that we understand what that means when things don't go right. I had a guy just yesterday was supposed to be teaching a course at this school and showed up 12 minutes late and was in a hurry trying to get all the students were here. All 12 students were here. And he said ATC wouldn't let him back in. He's a great pilot. It wasn't that he planned to be late. It wasn't that he wasn't thinking it's possible that he could be late. But there's a real chance that you might get held out of an airport. 12 minutes doesn't seem like much. But when does 12 become 30? And when does 30 become the regulation minimums? And if I thought 30 and I'm at 12, I'm freaking out.
Right.
You joke there's 3 critical points, 3 critical things you must have in a flight. Those 3 things again are?
Actually, I've changed this, Bobby. I used to use 3. I've changed it to 5.
Okay.
Now, there's 5 critical things that you got to have on a flight. And the first one is fuel. The second one is fuel. The third one is fuel.
Can I guess fourth?
Yeah.
Fuel?
Yeah. Well, you see the theme here.
Yeah.
You see the theme here. I had a gentleman on a check ride just several, I don't know, it's about 3 weeks ago. And he was doing a very, very nice job. and we were coming back to this airport to do the landings, and there happened to be a rain shower right smack dab over this airport. And I looked over at him and I said, well, what do you think? What do you want to do? And he went through a little bit of a mini panic attack. And then he said, well, let's either go to Navasota or Conroe. I said, great idea.
Fairly close, 10,
yeah.
10, 20 miles away.
They're probably two of the closest airports. And his reasoning was he thought this storm was moving south, so he wanted airports that were north. And so we ended up going to Conroe. We did 2 or 3 landings there. By then, we saw that the weather had moved out of Hooks, and then we came back over here. And jokingly in the debrief, I used the analogy of, okay, you walk up to the food court at the mall, and you wanted to get pizza, but the pizza place is closed. So what do you got to do? Well, you got to go next door and get chicken, or get a burger. So at the end, I asked him, I said, well, what'd you think of the check ride? And he says, I realized that if I can't get pizza, I can get chicken.
There you go.
There are alternatives. So just be aware.
But did he really know the runway length? That's the question.
Well,
it's a big towered airport,
yeah.
so it was probably safe.
Yeah.
But I do think I go back to, I said this many times, but I became a much better pilot when I got my multi-engine rating, because there are other things you think about. The safety in a few segments of flight are very different than they are in a single-engine aircraft, and it made me a much better thinker of how to prepare and how to execute a flight. But that runway length is such a different thing in a twin engine than it is in a single engine. How I load that aircraft, what I need to do to stop that aircraft just becomes very different. What about equipment? We were going to do a whole show called "Can I Go Without This?" but that's in future weeks. But it is about inoperative equipment. But would you go with one radio instead of 2? Probably, especially if it's a local flight. If I'm going to stay in the pattern, it's probably no big deal.
Right.
What about we talk about lights a lot. What if the green nav light was out, Wally? What is my thought process supposed to be? And do you think we're all doing the right things?
Yeah, I don't know. First of all, if it is a day flight, how many people are actually checking the lights? I mean, it is in the pre-flight checklist, so hopefully everybody is. But when you get into it, do we need the nav lights? Do we need the position lights for a day flight? And the answer is no, we don't. But there's a little bit more to it. We can't just say, oh, gee, the green nav light on the right wingtip is not working. It's daytime. We're good to go. There's more to it. That light needs to be disabled, and because we all make the assumption that we've got a burned out light bulb, and it's not that big a deal. But there could be a short in that light bulb, and that wire going out to that light bulb goes through the wing, and that's where the fuel tank is, and so that may not be the most ideal situation. So there is a little bit more to just going with inoperative equipment. And going back to the radio, I mean, I think we need to figure out, well, why is this number 2 radio not working? Do we have a bigger electrical problem? In all likelihood, the radio just is not working. The radio's broken.
Right.
You turn your TV on and it doesn't come on in your house. Do you immediately think, oh boy, I have an electrical problem with my house? No, you think that the TV is broken. And you probably do some troubleshooting. Maybe you plug something into the same outlet and see if it works. And if it does work, then you've kind of eliminated the electrical problem aspect of your house. So you think the TV is not working. So same thing with the radio. Determine why it's not working. But there are, we are able to go with inoperative equipment, and that's addressed in the regulations as well.
I had a flight instructor, not recently, thank goodness, but it's been a year or so, that ended up not going on a flight because the fire extinguisher was outside the green, and said that that was broken equipment. They didn't want to fly a plane with broken equipment. If you're a potential flight instructor and that's your personal minimums, you're not going to fly very much, because there's stuff like that that's always going to be somewhat out of whack. You just have to learn how to manage it and how to do it the right way, whether or not you placard it. And then there are some things you can help flight schools and mechanics hold the system accountable to where if a DME is out and it's marked inoperative, that it's supposed to be removed at the next 100 hour if it's not going to be repaired. But DME, while it might be helpful and beneficial and required for some approaches, it's not required to take off in that aircraft and fly in the pattern. So know what you need to know, and hopefully our future episode will help all of you out there know more of what you can go without and what you can't go without. Part of the aircraft, or part of the pre-flight planning for me, the aircraft, when I'm thinking about the aircraft, do I have all the gear and stuff I need or want in that aircraft, right? And technique, for sure. For me, it is for flight. For me, it is a big iPad that's in my flight bag, a little iPad on my knee, and my iPhone, all fully charged, all close by, all with my ForeFlight subscription on them. But we need to have other things, and I've been coached by different flight instructors. The airport diagram is something that is important, and I probably have heard someone say, for your check ride, make sure you have one out. But I'm pretty staunch on this one around this flight school. Not only do you need to have it out, you need to have it in front of you. You need to mark it. You need to listen to the ATIS, highlight what's not open, what has been closed, where the hot spots are, how am I going to navigate through those hot spots on the ground. I think expectation bias becomes a big problem around here, where people expect to go to the Delta ramp via Juliet Echo Papa, because we hear that all the time. If you turn on ground right now, you're going to hear that 1,000 times today. But it is possible that the winds change and you go a different place. And I think we got to have that taxi diagram out. Do you see strengths or weaknesses around taxi diagrams?
Yeah, that is required in the ACS for private. It's spelled out for private and for commercial. It basically, and I'm paraphrasing here, I don't have it right in front of me, it basically says that if a taxi diagram is available, you will use it. And you can't use it if you don't have it displayed. I mean, to say, well, it's available. And I have had applicants tell me, well, I had it available, I just wasn't using it. And I said, well, that doesn't meet the requirements. I'm sorry that we're having the conversation that we're having. And I will tell you, I had a young man take off from the wrong intersection, or begin a takeoff roll on a wrong intersection, and we taxied out. We applied pull power, and I said, okay, let's pull the power back and taxi back. And it didn't end the way I wanted it or he wanted it. So had he had the taxi diagram out, I think things would have been differently. And I think this is one thing that the CFIs are used to this airport. They know where they know the airport. They know it by memory. They don't. I'm not going to say they don't need it, because they do need it. I've been flying in and out of Houston Intercontinental Airport professionally for 34 years, and I can honestly say I don't think I have ever taxied in or out of Intercontinental Airport without the taxi diagram displayed. And I expect my first officer to have it out as well. And if we have a third pilot, I expect that third pilot to have it out as well. So 3 of us, triple redundancy. So if instructors are out there and not using it, well, shame on you. You should be mentoring your students, because by you not using it, a taxi diagram, whether you know it or not, you're telling your student that when they grow up and get to be real pilots, they don't need to use it either. And they do need to use it.
Yeah, and there is this cool factor to what we do, right? So if I'm seeing my CFI who's got, I'm assuming, 1,000 more hours than me, and they're using it at 20 hours, it's telling me it's probably a pretty good idea that I should be using it too, because I'm always chasing, or I feel like students are always chasing someone who's just ahead of them,
Right.
in their aviation career.
Right.
And if all of us that were just ahead of everybody behind us were using our taxi diagrams, I think naturally all those others around us will use it as well.
Yeah.
And it's going to make us safer. I used the story that I think we may have told in the past, but yesterday I was talking to someone and said, you know what, we never hear about the accidents or the incidents that didn't happen because someone was doing the right thing. We always hear about the ones that did happen because something didn't. I think Paul Craig talked about it.
Right.
I think we've discussed it. But recently, a plane of mine had a boo-boo because someone didn't do the right things and it got bent, and it's going to get fixed, and it's not the end of the world. Nobody got hurt, but it was so easily avoidable that you just sit back and you go, golly, how easily was this to be avoided? And it was just a moment in time where they thought they could handle it and solve it without doing the exact right thing.
Right.
Well, every time a plane did get bent, they did do the right thing, and we never hear about it. We never dwell on it. But this one time that it didn't, it got bent. And it's easy to point to that and say it got bent. But think about that with the taxi diagram. Something happens and you have it in your hand. We never hear about the taxis that went great.
Right.
But when two planes nose touch at an international airport somewhere in this country, what is it? It's all over Google.
Yeah.
It's, two planes crash on the ground,
Yep.
We hear about those, right? It's
Yeah.
probably a taxi diagram problem.
Right.
So
Right.
use it. Let's skip to environment. Airport conditions. We talked about runways, etc. Some of that stuff. Crosswinds are important. Controlled, uncontrolled are important. I think most of that big stuff we get. I think we get a lot of that. I think we get a lot of weather. If I had a question about weather, it's probably how far are we looking?
Yeah.
I think we talk about visibility more than we talk cloud bases, just between the two of us. And visibility is a big one. And how do I get to good visibility? Which way am I going to try and navigate or get to? Again, electrical failure in IMC is a very dangerous situation. I probably want to see the ground as fast as I can safely.
Yeah.
So if it was clear right behind me, I need to go back. If it's clear east of me, I need to go right, assuming I'm going north. I need to have some situational awareness about that stuff, and I'm not sure we're lazy in that respect, but I just think you got to be on your A game.
Yeah. Yeah, and I kind of use a little bit of a sports analogy. If you're playing football and you're a quarterback, I'll bet you Tom Brady knows where the defensive backs or who the defensive backs are, and he knows the weak link. He knows that the cornerback over on his left side is coming off a hamstring injury, so he's going to pick on him.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so he's gonna go over there. Okay, that's where the good weather is. The guy might be uncovered over on that side. So when you're getting your weather briefing, back up and try to get a big picture. Where is the high pressure system? If I'm flying a flight from El Paso to Houston, and I know I got high pressure over Oklahoma, and I get in a bad situation, well, I'm turning left. I'm heading toward Oklahoma. And what the situation I'm talking about is an electrical failure, because an electrical failure, not only can you not communicate, but you can't navigate.
Yeah, that's a big deal.
You're in a tough situation. So no, try to know where the good weather is.
Yeah, and so I don't think it's just where the storms are or where convection is. I think the further you go in your aviation career, the further you're going to make flights, the longer they're going to be, the more weather you'll transition, the more elevation you'll transition. And I think we just got to be thinking of those things. I don't think about ice ever. Right. I don't fly in the cold ever. I don't fly at altitude where there's freezing ever. But this past year we had a pretty good freeze down here. Lots of snow, lots of moisture that was frozen in the atmosphere. And I just don't think that's something that people in Houston think about regularly. But I bet people that train in Chicago, they're pretty good with knowing icing levels and what the where visible moisture is, for sure.
Yeah, we did get slapped around a little bit with the ice storm this past winter, and we were finding things. I was out trying to do some cross country flying with some younger pilots, and we were finding a lot of airports were just closed.
Yeah,
because there was snow on the runway. They didn't have any way to remove them.
A lot of airports still have FBOs that are closed because of all the water damage from frozen pipes, and it's something that we don't think about on a regular basis, but goes back to NOTAMs and those things that would be abnormalities that we don't normally interact with. And as we wrap, let's talk external pressures. I think we all know them. We might not have all experienced them, but I think I watch it happen in real time around here all the time, Wally. And I feel for these students that need to get something finished so that they can meet you and take a check ride. But it's so scary sometimes to watch people make decisions based on these external pressures. Just within the last 24 hours, I had to talk someone out of flying at night. Instrument-rated student pilot working on commercial who probably has 200-plus hours, probably not instrument current, meaning they don't have those approaches. We talk about this. We go to private. We do instrument. We don't do any instrument flying while we're working on commercial.
Right.
And here we are. They hadn't flown at night in 6 months, and they wanted to take my plane up to get night current. While that's legal, and the FAR aims say you can fly without passengers to get current again, it's not the best decision. And the decision was being driven around 0.2 of nighttime required for the commercial check ride that they weren't planning on taking for another 30 days, right? It just seems like they create that. We create that external pressure. If it has to be done now, why not incorporate that in something else with an instructor? It's going to be a different sight picture. It's going to be a different environment. What if something happens? Are you really ready for that?
Right.
It's just, it blows my mind sometimes. It also, crosswinds, customers around here need 0.2 cross country before they can get done. They didn't plan correctly, but they need that 0.2, which means that's going to be more of a 1.5 hour flight.
Right.
Man, we can't just squeeze that in somewhere, right?
Right. Right.
And they're solo private students. There's so much that could go wrong that they really need to make good decisions. And that external pressure of check ride or getting that next tick box or whatever that might be really is prevalent around here on a regular basis. And I ask everyone to be cautious.
And I think every flight, I would say almost every flight has some external pressures, unless you're just, there have been times where I've been at my hangar with no intention of flying, and I just kind of look around and go, well, geez, the weather's really nice. I think I'll go fly a little bit. I guess you could say in that situation there are not really a whole lot of external pressures, but most of us are flying to get somewhere, and whether it be you're coming in and this is the only time that you and your instructor and the weather and the airplane could all get together. I mean, that's an external pressure right there. So every flight has external pressures. We're not just talking about we got to get out of here in a hurry because we have to beat the weather system that's moving in or the weather that's moving into our destination. We've used the example of flying someone to a funeral or you're flying your girlfriend somewhere for a photo op to propose to her, and you've got the photographer all set up and all the stars are aligning. Yeah, those are external pressures. So,
even one less than that, I had a friend who brought their nephew, of all things, to do a discovery flight, really just fly around. They wanted to learn how to fly and they wanted to experience it first. Really good friend. They drove from Sugar Land, which, again, that's no small drive. That's an hour-plus drive. And so they get here, and the clouds, we were talking, and I was like, look, the clouds are kind of low. I'm not sure how good a day it's going to be to fly. They wanted to chance it. They come up here. It's 1,500 feet. We can't, can we legally fly? Yeah. Is it a good day to discover flight? No. What happens if the clouds come down lower? It's a fall day. It's very likely. And we did that twice. And I'll tell you, the second time, the pressure to get in the air for me, them making the drive twice, was pretty intense.
Right.
And I just ended up sticking to my guns and saying no, and they drove home. Actually, I think that day we did a little bit in the sim just to do a little bit of something. But the external pressures are real. There's no question, and they don't always feel as real as they are in real time, right? They don't seem like that big of a deal.
Yeah.
But those are where the chain of events, that first one is the first of many that become, unfortunately, really bad accidents for some people.
And even on check rides, I will have applicants where, the weather is supposed to be well within our margins at the time that we're going to go fly, and we get ready to go fly, and the weather isn't quite right. And a lot of time the applicant will look at me and he'll say, well, when could you finish this check ride? And I will say, don't factor that one bit into your decision whether we're going to go fly or not. That should not be part of the decision.
Talk about external pressures.
Yeah, because if I say it's going to be 6 weeks, they may be more likely to push the envelope. And let's see if we can get this done. Whereas if I say I can get you in tomorrow afternoon, okay, well, now if I can get them in tomorrow afternoon, I'll usually say that, and it alleviates a little bit of the pressure for them. But external pressures are huge.
So a very short paragraph in a very big book, 91-103 Preflight Action, just produced a 40-minute podcast that we barely scratched the surface on all the things that a pilot should be responsible for and doing to make sure that they've covered their responsibilities as PIC for a flight. So try not to be lazy. Try to have a good plan. Try to get better with your plan. Try to demonstrate professional pilot things in front of other pilots, like taxi diagrams, etc., to make other pilots better. That's what we try to do here. As always, fly safe and stay behind the prop.
Thanks for checking out the Behind the Prop podcast. Be sure to click subscribe and check us out online at BehindTheProp.com. Behind the Prop is recorded in Houston, Texas. Creator and host is Bobby Doss. Co-host is Wally Mulhern. The show is for entertainment purposes only and is not meant to replace actual flight instruction. Thanks for listening, and remember, fly safe.